Today on Passion for Food, we're going to be making these out of this world lockdown rice and beans. I know we've all been there. You're stuck at home, maybe in quarantine, and you just want a quick, simple, and nutritious meal. Well, this is it. So let's jump in here and get started. Now, normally I'm not much of a bean counter, but like rice, the liquid to dry bean ratio here does matter. So we want about 2 cups of dry beans of our choice. I'm using pintos here today. And once we have that, we're going to go ahead and spill the beans into a medium pot. You want at minimum a pot that can hold 4 times the volume of your beans. So we have 2 cups of beans. Our pot needs to hold at least 8 cups. But because these are dry, not canned beans, they're not ready to cook with right away. They do need to be soaked first. Our 2 main options are a cold soak overnight, I like to call those cool beans, or a hot soak. And you know what they say, some like it hot. So that's what I'm going with here today. The main problem I have with the cool soak is I just have to decide the day before that I'm going to want beans. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm kind of a spur-of-the-moment chef most of the time. I mean, what if I soak a bunch of dry beans and wake up the next day just feeling corny instead? Well, I'm stuck. I'm just going to have to eat all those beans. And most people advise you against putting salt in the water when you're soaking those. Supposedly it interferes with the beans' ability to absorb water. I'm a little dubious about that. I might do like a food myth episode on that sometime if anybody cares. Anyway, all we need to do for our bean hot soak is bring these up to a gentle simmer, and then we're just going to cut off the heat and let these sit for a total of 1 to 2 hours. 1 hour works, but I really think 2 hours is better. And after 2 hours, you can see the beans have approximately doubled in size, and they've probably absorbed half to about 2/3 of the liquid that we put in there. That's one of the reasons we wanted to measure that. Even though we're not going to be using that liquid, we do want to use enough, otherwise you'll have dry beans poking out on top. So we just want to go ahead and drain these. No need to rinse or anything like that. We'll just go ahead and return this pot straight to the stove. And you see that little bit of liquid in the pan. Don't dry that out. We're actually going to use that to help us render out the fat of our bacon. Yes, of course I'm putting bacon in here. This is about 6 slices. And we're just going to render our bacon down until it's nice and crispy. In theory, you could probably just dump everything into the pot at this point, but I feel like you get a much better flavor and texture if you actually pre-render and cook out that bacon. Plus, you get lots of that wonderful bacon fat to cook the rest of our ingredients in. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and add 1 large onion, along with about 8 cloves of garlic. Yes, that is a lot. Thanks for noticing. Which reminds me, do you know how many vampires showed up at the garlic eating competition? I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure it was countless. Anyway, we're going to give that a quick mix, and then I'm going to go in with 1 full can of stewed tomatoes. And keep in mind, these are just rough guidelines. You can season these with whatever flavors you like, but I really think the acidity from the tomatoes balances things out nicely for us. In addition, I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of brown sugar. White sugar with a touch of molasses would be fine, or of course you could just leave that out completely. And this is a good time to crack in some fresh black pepper to taste, although we do want to hold off on the salt right now, as we are going to be adding some stock to this, and the bacon that we already have is quite salty as it is. And we can always add more salt later, but good luck removing any. Additionally, we're going to add 1 or 2 bay leaves. This just gives it a nice herby aroma in the background, along with 1 teaspoon of cumin, and about a tablespoon of crushed red pepper flakes. Chili powder would also be a good choice here. And you might have been thinking, hey, how much more flavor can we get in here? Well, quite a bit more. And we're going to add 1 cup of beef stock and 1 cup of chicken stock. If you've never tried the combination, I really recommend you try it. It's surprisingly good, especially as a soup base. You know those fancy sipping soups you get at those Japanese steak houses? Well, that's literally all they are, with just, a little sliced mushroom and some green onions thrown on there to make it look all fancy. Anyway, at this point we can go ahead and add our beans back to the pot. And you can also use canned beans for this, by the way. We just want to give this a good stir and bring this back up to a gentle simmer, at which point we're going to cover this and cook it for another 1 to 2 hours. Depending on your beans, they could be ready after 1 hour, so let's go ahead and give those a quick check. And if you locate those bay leaves, you can go ahead and pull those out. We've extracted all the flavor from those that we're going to get. My beans were still pretty firm, so I'm going to give them that second hour, but it's still worth giving them a quick check anyway. But it really is worth the wait. Here we are after 2 hours, and you can see that these beans have absorbed most of the liquid that we had in our pot. These are like the best baked beans in the world, except we don't have to bother with all that baking nonsense. We can see that liquid has become wonderfully nice and thick, and we didn't have to add any emulsifiers or anything. That's 100% bean power. The nice thing about using dry beans and this cooking method is that you get them cooked perfectly, but the texture is still slightly firm. They shouldn't just be falling apart into refried beans. Not that refried beans aren't awesome, but that's not what we're making here today. And this is also when we want to taste for seasoning. I think you'll find that the braising liquid was probably salty before, but it might need a little more salt now as the beans have absorbed a great deal of it. And that was the case here for me, so I'm going to add about a teaspoon of additional salt and just get that mixed in. But that's it. What we've been waiting for is finally ready. So let's go ahead and grab a spoon of these and serve them up. These really make the perfect side dish or main course, and if you're serving these alongside rice, that is a perfect food. You don't need anything else on your plate. That is complete nutrition. Generally, for that classic rice and beans dish, I like using about equal parts rice and beans. And while you don't need anything else, I feel like I would have been remiss if I didn't mention that a little bit of mozzarella is a great touch. There's just something about perfectly cooked beans and melty mozzarella that really warms my heart. We could also pair this with a little bit of avocado. But don't forget to put a pinch of salt on there, otherwise that'll just taste like mushy grass clippings, and nobody likes that. And if we're feeling double fancy, we can toss some tortilla chips on there. So without further ado, let's go in for the bite that we've all been waiting for. I really love that little bit of stretch and texture we get from the mozzarella cheese, and these just have an awesome savory but slightly sweet flavor. But that's it for our out-of-this-world rice and beans. This is a great meal to make when you're stuck at home or just any time. I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, give me a thumbs up below and consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you don't miss our future episodes. And check out one of the videos playing on the screen now for more awesome recipes. This has been Graham with Passion for Food.